over 650 grams of cocaine, mandatory life. I was like, who was this white kid, that was supposedly running all these black gangs and running the city of Detroit?
When you're 17 years old, you're moving kilos, you're at a status of drug dealer that most 17-year-olds don't reach. Why would juvenile, nonviolent drug offender be kept in prison beyond 29 years?
I found out that the reality was much different than the legend.
And I knew that there were corrupt police officers involved in this thing.
Coleman Young is the most powerful politician in the history of Detroit, and his niece was Kathy Volson, and she was married to Johnny Curry, one of the biggest drug dealers in Detroit.
Every police officer down at 1300 was crooked.
If you're a criminal, I would advise you never to get a nickname.
I did the same thing. They gave me 3 years paper, and I'm the only one on my case out of 10 or 12 people. I got off at a year and a half because I was doing everything like you said. As soon as I hit the halfway house, they want to hold you down for 2 weeks before they let you work. I told them I have a job right out the get. I go, you guys take a third of my check. I go, why don't you just let me go to work? And I did, and I would leave at 5 a.m. I wouldn't come back to like 6 or 7 at night. Right. And I would stay out of I would just to sleep there. That's it. I didn't want to deal with anything else, man. Cause I seen people going back. We were cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I looked at it like, like the movie The Matrix, how they have The Matrix, right? And
right.
And like I did like 21 years, like out of The Matrix, like how the people who were fighting for freedom or whatever.
Yeah.
And so when I got back in, I was kind of just like, I was like that one dude. I was like, man, plug me back into The Matrix. I was like, I'm all down, capitalism, whatever. I was like, plug me back in. I was still writing, and critical of a lot of different things that I experienced and that other people are forced, especially like when it comes to like, systematic, oppression and, racial injustice. I've written a lot about that. But still, despite all the things wrong with our country, I still think this is probably like the only country where you can just have an idea, and if you stick with it, you can end up making a lot of money, and you can change your situation.
And you probably know this from all your years of reading, that especially behind bars, that the whole humanities system going back thousands of years, it's always got a common theme of some people have power, and they will do what it takes to keep it, even, no matter what it takes. And this is worldwide. You get into places like our country, and you have an opening of rights, if you will, throughout the course of our history. And nowadays, you're right. Really, there really isn't much of an excuse.
So, Seth, I was in Hollywood. I did a web series with some friends. I do some writing. I do some music writing. I've had some parodies I've done a lot of stuff in that nature. I see the directors, some of the directors, I was reading a list of some of the directors you like, Quentin Tarantino and Guy Ritchie. Those are two of my favorite directors. I like their style of how they put their films together. And I know you did the executive producing on White Boy Rick.
Yes.
So what I want to know is what led you into the idea of going into the movies business? Where did you get your experience and knowledge from?
I mean, I started writing like probably like the end of the 90s. I was I'm an athletic dude. I always played sports my whole life, so like I was like the white boy in prison. Like I was a white boy playing ball with all the black dudes. So a lot of times I'd be the only white dude on the court. I played soccer with all the Mexicans and Jamaicans, and I would play softball. It's usually more mixed. But, that's kind of my things. I worked out, I played sports, and I got a college education, and I helped people, like in the law library doing institutional, grievances and stuff like that. That's kind of how I did my time besides writing. But I kind of found out, because in the feds, man, you meet all types of like infamous people, and like in the 90s, like I'm on the compound with like all these mafia dudes, I'm on the compound with all these, Colombian cocaine cartel dudes, right? And, I was naturally curious because you hear people talk about them. And then, so I would like call my mom, and I'd be like, man, go find me books, pre-Amazon or pre-internet, she'd have to go to the bookstore and get it sent to me. But, after like Amazon and the internet, about the mid-90s, she could just order stuff on Amazon. So I was reading all these books about these guys, right? Especially the mob dudes, because I was on the East Coast, so a ton of mob dudes. And then at the same time, like mid-90s, that's like when gangster rap became like super popular, you know. So you know, I'm like the only white dude like hanging out with all the black dudes like in the, you know, like in the MTV Raps or like the BET room, you know, and all these gangster rappers they're talking about these dudes, you know, and you know, a lot of these guys from these guys' neighborhoods, like they're in the lyrical lore of rap. And so they're, you know, they're name dropping these dudes, they're name dropping these crews, they're name dropping where these guys are from. And then, you know, I hear the dudes like their homeboys, you know, who I'm playing basketball with and who I got relationships with, you know, they're talking about them, you know, and then they'll be almost as a side, they'll be like, oh yeah, that dude's over in fucking B left. And I'd be like, what? You know, that dude's on B left. And then so, you know, I'm curious, right? You know, so you know, that's the thing about me too. You know, I like to read. You know, and they're so boring, you gotta read. But I have like this natural curiosity. So I'm asking my mom, I'm like, man, find me books on this guys, you know, find me books on these guys. And there's like no books on these dudes, right? So I was already doing like some journalism stuff. You know, I was writing for like the prison sports newsletter. I was doing some journalism stuff. And you know, I got the idea. I'm like, man, I'm gonna start writing books about these guys. So, you know, I approached a couple different dudes, you know, and you know, some didn't want to tell their story, some did want to tell their story. And so you know, I got my wife, you know, to form a publishing house, Gorilla Convict, and I started writing, you know, like these like prison stuff and you know, gangster tales, you know, from like the inner city drug lords that were kind of being lionized in you know, the lyrical lore of gangster rap. And so I think before that, I was always kind of, I was already like a storyteller because, you know, I used to like when I was younger, I would like, you know, play in bands. I played guitar and I would like sing, you know, write songs and stuff. So I was already had that kind of creativity to me. So in there, you know, but in jail, you know, prison, it's kind of like a harder world. So, you know, you can't, you know, sing like no like angst ridden songs or, you know, like I'm sad, I got 25 years, you know, dudes are gonna kind of, you know, look at you funny. So I was looking for an outlet for my creativity. And then I was taking all these college classes, you know, creative writing and journalism. So I kind of came up with the idea, you know, I'm gonna write these dudes' stories. And so I kind of took that and I was always looking for different dudes to write about. That's how I first find out about White Boy Rick, because you know I was locked up with a lot of dudes from Detroit, and they're talking about like this white guy from Detroit who was like this big drug dealer, and he was like the head of all these drug gangs, like in the inner city, like when he was just a teenager. And I was like, man, who is this dude? So you know, I had my wife like searching in the because a lot of these dudes, maybe I wasn't locked up with them. I might have been locked up with their co-defendant or their homeboy or one of their
Right.
relatives, you know, but I would have my wife, you know, find them and then write them, you know, and I would send out letters and I would be like, hey man, you know, I'm trying to do this, blah, blah, blah. Here's my credits. I've been doing some stuff for Vice, you know, and Don Diva magazine. So that's what I did. I hooked up with Rick, and it was funny with Rick because Rick has this big legends in mythology about him, you know, on his time in the streets, like a street legend.
Right.
But really, like when I'm writing to him, he's like telling me, like, he's like, dude, like I got screwed.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
he's like, yeah, he's like, man, I was an informant since I was 14. He was like, they railroaded me. And I'm just like, at first, like, I was kind of taken aback because, you know, I'm kind of like, I'm writing about these dudes like, you know, like Billy the Kid or like Jesse James, you know, I'm like glorifying and romanticizing them because I'm not writing for the outside world. I'm writing for my peers in prison,
Right.
you know, and that's like what everybody wanted, you know, and I got a lot of recognition for it and I kind of craved that recognition. So I'm writing about all this stuff. And so it took me a couple years to kind of figure out how would I would write about his story, you know, because he was telling me something opposite than like what the legend and the myth was. And you know, eventually as I got older and I started writing more, I started doing like more, you know, criminal justice stuff, more prison reform stuff, and kind of pointing out, you know, like sentencing disparity, like over sentencing, you know, wrongful conviction. You know, I got more into stuff like that. So then I started writing about his case like that. And I was writing for a couple different websites, and I started getting a lot of play, you know, like in the, you know, like around 2012, like right before I got out, like a lot of people were becoming real interested, you know, about this wrongful conviction over sentencing type of stuff. You know, people were like really looking at it because,
Yeah.
you know, by this time, like those drug laws have been around since '88. So it's been like 20 something years, you know, the same drug laws I was incarcerated under. And yeah, so I kept writing. And while I'm doing all these books and stuff, like through my college, I got my master's degree too through California State University. And when I was getting my master's degree, I was taking like screenwriting courses, and there was like a lot of movies I wanted to see, like like gangster flicks or like crime flicks or like even documentaries that I couldn't see, but through my master's degree, I could like they would let me form these, like basically make my own classes up. And
Right.
so I would make these classes with like all these crime films and these crime documentaries that I wanted to see. And so when I started getting this stuff in, under the guise of education, and writing papers and stuff about them, I started forming the idea. I was like, I'm writing these books that are like just like these documentaries and like these crime films. So I started forming in my mind. I'm like, man, when I get out, I want to take this stuff that I'm doing and I want to take it to film. I want to be a filmmaker. First my idea was like, from the mid 90s, like I want to be a writer. That's going to be my future. But then as I got closer to the door, it kind of evolved. And as I took more college classes, and got more knowledge and read more books, I was like, you know what? I was like, I want to make movies. I want to make films. So, I kind of hit the door, and that was my goal. And really, I like I said earlier, I started doing journalism, and I was making a lot of money from journalism. So I kind of had like a 5-year detour. But during that detour, I met this guy named Sean Reck. He's based out of Cleveland. He's an independent documentary filmmaker. He has a studio. It's called Transition Studios. And I met him because he had this film, a wrongful conviction film called Murder in the Park. It was on Showtime, and I think it's on Netflix now, but it had a long run on Showtime. And it was about this wrongful conviction thing. And I interviewed him for Vice. So it was like weird. So my journalism actually led to me meeting a lot of filmmakers, because I started gravitating to the filmmakers that were doing like gangster stuff or criminal justice reform, anything to do with true crime. And at the same time this was happening, I started interviewing like these true crime documentarians. And it was the same time like true crime like started blowing up, because it's like 2015, 2016 when I first got out. So this is like, true crime's like blowing up. I'm doing pieces, I'm interviewing all these guys that are making these true crime documentaries, and I'm getting these connections to them. And then these guys already like true crime stuff. So then when they find out my backstory, like they're immediately gravitating to me and interested in me and my story. So then like Sean Reck, we do this interview for Vice, and I help him plug his stuff. And then he's like, hey man, man, you got a real interesting backstory. He's like, man, I'm going to fly you up to Cleveland, man. He goes, you got any film ideas? I'm looking for my next film. So he flies me up there. I meet him, and I found out this dude, like, he basically cut his teeth in the entertainment industry. He did like 200 like Crime Stopper shows for like all the networks, before he put out his first feature doc. And with these 200 Crime Stopper shows, he had won like 9 regional Emmys. So, I'd go in his office and like, this dude got like 9 Emmys. And I'm like, man, who the fuck is this dude? I'm like, this dude, like, this is a really accomplished filmmaker, So I go in and we're talking about different stuff, and I'm kind of pitching, different ideas. And I had like some different, prison related stuff where I kind of wanted to expose the prison system and all the sub industries around the prison system, and, how corrupt I felt it was. Because like in prison, like they got brands in prison, like they only sell in prison. They don't sell on the street. It's like special brands,
Right.
like of coffee or whatever.
A guy gets the contract for that, and he gets rich off of it. That's it. That's
it's like a monopoly. It's a monopoly. Keefe coffee. Keefe.
Yeah, I remember Keefe Coffee, but I'm thinking of the shoes. The what's his name? The game show host.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. Oh, what the fuck is his name, man? I know what you're talking about, though.
It's,
yeah.
The price is right. The price is right.
Yeah. What is that dude's name? Yeah, he did. He had like a whole line of prison stuff. That dude.
Prison shoes and everything. Oh, fudge, I can't remember his name all of a sudden.
Yeah. So look, I'm there with Sean Reck, and I'm throwing like different ideas I had at him, right? And then this is at the same time when the White Boy Rick Hollywood movie with Matthew McConaughey is like, in pre-production, like it's going in production. They've announced it at like a Variety deadline, and it's like this $40 million movie. So then, we're talking, and then he's like, didn't you you wrote some stuff about White Boy Rick's case. And I'm like, yeah, man. I go, I wrote an article in 2012 that went viral, you know, because it was like the first time, you know, he was coming out and saying basically like he was an informant and he, you know, he shouldn't have been in prison, you know, and it was kind of like, you know, blowing up. And that article went viral. I wrote it for the site, The Fix. So he was like, yeah, man, I was reading some of your stuff. And he's like, you know, they got a big Hollywood movie right now with Matthew McConaughey. He's like, are you still in touch with Rick? And I was like, yeah. I go, that's my road dog. I go, you know, I wrote him. I started writing him like around 2005. So, you know, we were writing back and forth like my last 10 years of prison. And then when I got out, you know, he actually started calling me, and I was talking to him, you know, basically every couple of weeks or every month, you know, and he was still, you know, fighting to get out. So, you know, me and him talked about that, and he was like, man, he was like, let's do a documentary film. He goes, I want the film on White Boy Rick to be my next film. He's like, I want to get him out of prison, you know. And I was like, man, should I go? I'd love to get him out of prison too. I go, he got fucked. I mean, he went in there when he was like 17. He got a life sentence when he was a juvenile. The Supreme Court even said in 2012 that juveniles can't get some, you know, life sentences, and they still didn't give him any play. So I was like, you know, and I had a lot of material from him, and I wrote a bunch of articles about him. So that pretty much, you know, my work formed the basis of that film. And like, you know, and Sean told me, he was like, okay, let's do this film. And I was like, look, I go, I know you're the director and this is your studio, but I go, I just don't want to, you know, and I knew kind of how it worked, you know. I go, I just don't want to sell you my idea. You know, I just don't want to, you know, give me some money for my idea and, you know, kind of kick me to the curb and run with it. You know, I go, I see you're a very accomplished filmmaker. I'm like, you know, I want you to mentor me. I want you to train me. I want you to show me, you know. I go, I'm a writer. I know how to tell a story, but I go, I don't know how to make a documentary film. I've never made one. I go, I want to make films. I go, I want you to show me how to make a documentary film. And I go, more importantly, I said, you're an independent filmmaker. I said, I want you to teach me the business side of it. You know, so we kind of came to this little agreement, and, you know, he said, okay, I'll do it. You know, he liked me, and, you know, he would fly me in for all the shoots, you know, like when the editor was working on the cuts, he would send me versions of the cuts. I would like send him notes. You know, I would watch the interviews, and after we did them, and send them notes, you know, they would transcribe in them, and I would go through them and say, like, you know, I think this would be good. This would be good. You know, it's not like ultimately he had the decision, you know, it's his movie. He was the director, but, you know, I was right there with like me, him, you know, and the editor. You know, I was like right in the inner circle as this film was being made, and as we were deciding, you know, who should be interviewed, who can we get, you know, to be interviewed. And you know, I started out as just an access guy, but, you know, I turned into, like, you know, while I was learning, you know, I feel like I played a big part in this film, and you know, I'm eternally grateful to him for letting me, you know, play a part, letting me be involved, you know, because like I say, he just could have took my idea, you know, and
Yeah.
throw me some money and kind of kick me to the curb, because most of the time
Right. And,
that's
and
what
then they
these.
change your idea to suit their narrative. More often than not, guys who sell their stories or other stories or any of that stuff, you see the product that they end up putting out, and you're like, that's not exactly how it was. There's some truth to it still, but, you know, and one of the things I've noticed here too, Seth, is a common theme with a lot of us that were, you know, involved with the mob or the street gangs or prison or whatever. Um, a lot of us, we got into English or journalism or, you know, writing in general. I have one of my bachelor's degrees is in journalism, and you take Gunnar Lindblom, a friend of mine, he, you know, wrote his books from behind bars.
That's my boy. That's my boy too.
Yeah,
That's my boy Gunnar.
The common theme is so many of us think the linguistic side of our brains, you know.
No, that's what they say. The pen is mightier than the sword.
Oh yeah.
So that's Bob Barker, by the way.
Yeah,
Oh,
Bob Parker.
come on
He had a
down.
whole line. He had
Yeah.
a whole line of prison stuff.
Yeah, my shower shoes.
Yeah.
Man.
So
Wow.
so basically that's how White Boy, you know, came about. And like I say, I mean, just like Michael Santos, I mean, whatever, like in prison, Michael Santos saw something in me, you know, and he took me under his wing, you know, and he kind of, you know, changed me in a way. The same thing, you know, Sean Reck, man, he saw something in me, you know, he took me under his wing, and like he, he changed stuff for me. You know, he opened doors. He showed me, you know, a different way to do stuff. You know, it was something I was looking for, but I mean, he didn't have to do all that. So, you know, like I said, I'll be eternally grateful, you know, to him. Like I would say Michael Santos and Sean Reck are two of my biggest, you know, inspirations and mentors in my life, and have made me, you know, who I am today.
Well,
Basically.
Seth, I definitely want to pick your brain. I left some messages with you, left you my number. Please get a hold of me, because I have some ideas I would love to run by you.
All right, no, that's cool. We'll talk, man.
Yep.
Yeah, and let's have you on again, Seth. You know, we're coming up on an hour and a half, which it doesn't feel like that, and that lets you know that we've had a great conversation. You know, I'd imagine you kept a lot of guys entertained while you're doing all that time. Seth, just to close this out, let the folks know how they can get a hold of you and whatever it is that you'd like to promote real quick.
Yeah, you know, I'm on social media under my name, Seth Ferranti, SethFerranti. So you can find me Facebook, Twitter,
That's a cool name,
IG.
by the way. I love that name.
Thank you.
It sounds like a line of clothes or a car from Italy. I mean, you know, it's got that sound to it. Sorry, go ahead. I had to say that though.
No, that's cool. I appreciate it. And then like, look, you know, I wrote and produced White Boy, you know, with Sean Reck. He's a director from his studio, Transition Studios. That's on Netflix right now. We actually went on Netflix April 1st, and the last I heard, it had like 20 million views. So it's been trending really hard. It's really been blowing up. And so go check that out. I'm in the film too, so I'm a talking head in that film too. So you can see me talk. And my website, GorillaConvict.com. I started that. It's basically a blog. I started from prison. So I mean, if you're interested in like street stuff,
as in guerrilla fighter.
Yeah, no, Gorilla. It's GORILLA.
Okay,
Yeah,
Gorilla.
Convict, CONVICT.
Awesome.
And then and all my books are on Amazon.
Sweet. All right, everybody. Hey, thank you for joining us. We're going to have yet another great episode here with another great guest in a week. Thank you again, Seth, for being here with us. And thank you, Mikal. All right,
Thank you.
We are out.
And his niece was Kathy Volson, and she was married to Johnny Curry, one of the biggest drug dealers in Detroit.
Every police officer down at 1300 was crooked.
If you're a criminal, I would advise you never to get a nickname.
So they said, we got to kill that white boy.
Law enforcement created almost the perfect criminal.
You're not trying to tell me that you're an angel, that you never did anything wrong, man.
I've been involved in wrongdoing, but I don't feel I did anything to receive a life sentence.